Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lisa Schwebel, and as the Executive Director of Parapsychological Foundation, and on behalf of our Board of Trustees, and our President, Mrs. Eileen Coley, who's trying to sit on the stairs. I don't know.
That's exactly what I know you do.
On behalf of all of us, we welcome you here this evening. We're particularly happy to have as our speaker for this night's lecture Dr. Lisa Schwebel. Dr. Schwebel apparently, I think, did her undergraduate work at Hunter and graduated with a BA in religion, magna cum laude. Continued her research at the University of Edinburgh Philosophy Department. Then went on quite a litany here. Then got her master's at Fordham University in theology, and then pursued her doctoral research under the mentorship of Dr. John Heaney, who I'm very honored to say is with us this evening. He's a past associate of Parapsychology Foundation. It's happy to welcome you back. So, as you can see, Dr. Schwebel is eminently qualified to speak to the topic at hand tonight, parapsychological experiences of interpretations of religious experiences. You want to take it from the top? Parapsychological interpretations of religious experiences. Yes?
I think so.
Yes. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to get off and hand you into her very capable hands. Dr. Lisa Schwebel.
I wanted to say I'm very glad that you braved the elements to come here this evening. Also, yesterday afternoon, there were two students talking outside my office at Hunter in the religion program, and one says to the other, he's not coming to class Wednesday night because the Star Wars movie is opening. And the other guy says to him, you can't not come because the movie's on. I mean, it's ridiculous. Just because it's opening, you can't not come. And he says to him, no, I have tickets. And the other guy goes, okay. So we are the people who didn't have tickets to the Star Wars movie opening today. So I feel with you that we did not get tickets to Star Wars. I'd like to start by publicly thanking Lisa Coley and the Parapsychology Foundation, not just for this opportunity to speak with you, but also for the resources in providing this great library which made so much of my dissertation possible. And so it's a great opportunity for me to acknowledge the debt that I owe to this institution. And I hope that what I have to say this evening will go some way toward repaying that debt. Also, I couldn't do this without Dr. Joanne McMahon, who is lurking in the back there, who I think most of you know, knows nearly everything. I think it's just one of the truths of life that Joni knows nearly everything. And if she doesn't, she knows where to look it up, because my students tell me that when they come here and they come back, and she says, no, but she knows where to look it up, and I think that's probably the best skill you need, is just to know where to look it up. And so many of the ideas as well that I'm going to talk with you about tonight, I have developed in conversations with John Heaney, but also with Joni McMahon. So again, an obligation to pay back what has been so graciously given to me. I'd like to start out by telling you what I'm interested in, a few ideas about what I do, to apologize also for the fact that I should probably pace. I can't sit still and talk or stand still and talk. And let you know what I do, what I'm interested in, and then maybe you can then tell me what you think about that. What I'm basically interested in is the nature of God's activity in the world. And I'm interested in a particular form of divine activity. I'm interested in what I call special activity, or activity in which God is claimed to act in a manner different from God's ordinary sustaining and conserving activity in the world. So, in short, I'm interested in visions, in prophecies, and in miracles. I got interested in this because of my interest in religion and parapsychology, or rather, because of my interest in religion and psychology, which had always been the focus of my research. And in particular, my interest in religion, psychology, and popular religion, a term I dislike, and what I would prefer to use is the practice of faith rather than popular religion. I think that's a misnomer. And I'm particularly interested in the Christian practice of faith. Although visions, prophecies, and miracles, and some of the ones I'm going to talk about, are not exclusive to Christianity. Those are the ones that I actually know the most about. So I was interested in religion psychology. I was interested in the practice of faith. And what I found in looking at the practice of faith is that it is saturated, overwhelmed by moving, weeping, bleeding statues of Mary, by visions of Mary, by miracles, the majority of which are healing miracles. And the sheer numbers are just quite overwhelming. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that, it's probably conservative to say, that at least every other week there is another claim somewhere in the world. Someone is seeing Mary, talking to Mary, having some event occurring in relationship to religious phenomena. In fact, I think down the block on York Avenue, wasn't there the Our Lady of the Tree? Somebody saw Mary in a tree, which they didn't, York Avenue and 70th, does anybody but me remember this? Yes, and there's a little shrine there, and there were all kinds of events about should we cut it down, should we trim it, because Mary appeared in the tree. 15 million people a year, and that is a very low estimate, visit religious shrines of only the Christian persuasion. That leaves out Hindus, Buddhists, Jews, etc. Now, over 15 million people a year go to shrines. Millions more are interested in and believe that these events occur. And they understand these events as evidence of God's favor, as proof of divine existence, and as manifestations of the divine will. And that's in particular where I'm interested in them. That people take these events, these external order events, and understand them as in some way conclusive proof of the authenticity of some form of divine communication. So I'm interested in how can we understand these events. I got interested in parapsychology because I was very unhappy with the prevailing view. And the prevailing view was, we live in bad times. We live in difficult times. And there are a lot of gullible, credulous people out there. And they're just dying to believe something. And so they'll believe this. And hence the Academy just dismisses or ignores these events. And it struck me that we can't have over 15 million credulous, gullible, deluded people. That all of this is some kind of fantasy that they have all invented in order to make them feel better in terrible times. And so I thought we need to see some other explanation. And then, of course, I met John Heaney, who has written probably the best modern book on theology and parapsychology, called The Sacred and the Psychic. And he said, no, there's another way to go here. Now, there is a potential parapsychological explanation of these phenomena. So I got interested in that. Now, religion and parapsychology have long been connected to one another, and it's only in recent times that it seems that we need to open up a dialogue that didn't exist before. And in the 18th century, Pope Benedict XIV, in his magnum opus on the beatification and canonization of saints, which I may say is still used as the main series of books and guidelines on beatification and canonization. John Paul II has made some revisions, but Benedict is still the main one, simply assumed natural parapsychological powers, and hence wanted to argue how can we distinguish the graces of God from them. That is, Benedict simply assumes them. And in the 18th century, Benedict presents us with a model of how religion ought to look at these events. So Benedict does two great Benedict stories that I wish to tell you, which show you how we ought to be looking at this theologically, and of course what he concludes from them. The first is to show that Benedict was himself a man of science, and did not feel that science in any way needed to be divorced from the religious enterprise, and certainly not from the religious enterprise of investigating all manner of psychic or paranormal claims. He started out his career as Prosper Lambertini, as the devil's advocate, which used to exist. The Vatican has a congregation for beatification and canonization, which you might know about because they're in the papers all the time now as they keep sort of beatifying and canonizing people. And part of the process, it used to be a twofold process. Somebody would come up as a candidate, and you'd have one person whose job it would be to promote the cause of the candidate. And that person would assemble all of the information in favor of that person, including the requirement for miracles. What the congregation also had was somebody called the devil's advocate. And his job was to go around and try and debunk and poke holes in the evidence put forward by the promoter for the cause. Prosper Lambertini starts his whole career before he becomes Benedict XIV as a devil's advocate. And there is a great story that Renee Haynes tells about Lambertini starting his career and his interest in science, and that religion ought not to be divorced from science in this area. As it's sort of like his first week on the job, and he is assigned as a junior to go and investigate the case of a nun who has applied for some measure of sanctification here. And her claim is, and the claim of her order is, that she has eaten nothing but the sacred host for months on end. She subsists only on the sacred host. And Lambertini sort of, comes along, sort of assisting the senior, and they interview everybody. And they interview everybody from the Mother Superior of the convent all the way down to the scullery maids. And each and every one testifies to this nun's holiness, and without a doubt, she has had no food except for the sacred host for months on end. That's the only thing that she's eaten. And as they're sort of, packing up their stuff, they're ready to go, the senior is satisfied that he's asked all the right questions, gotten all the right answers. Sort of Lambertini, and I always like this sort of junior-senior idea, sort of raising his hands and pushing forward. And he says to the senior, and of course he doesn't ask the nun, he sort of approaches the senior first. And he says, would you mind, if I just asked one little question? And you just sort of see the older guy sort of going, I have to get a shot at it here. And he says, well, all right, just one question. And he turns to the nun and he says, dear sister, he said, I don't mean to embarrass you. He said, but do you move your bowels? And then it's you sort of blushes and covers her face and says, actually, yes, I do. And Lambertini instantly turns to a senior and says, then she must be eating something more than the host. And of course it becomes revealed later on that the order was very hard up for cash, and they hoped by putting forward this story that they had a nun in their midst who only subsisted on the host, which was a miracle, that it would draw all kinds of people to the convent and the order would make a fortune. And so, but this is the mentality that he brings to the papacy, and it's the mentality that suffuses all of his writings on how the church ought to look at claims of extraordinary and special events, clearly with all the science available at the time. He takes this to heart when he is asked to beatify Joseph of Cupertino once he's been made pope. And you might know Joseph of Cupertino, known as the Flying Monk. You heard of Joseph? Very popular. He's getting a resurgence as Joseph of Cupertino, the Flying Monk. And he has been put, and of course, even in the 18th century, in his own time, he was known as the Flying Monk. Joseph had what his fellow monks thought of as a really rather annoying habit of levitating off the ground and getting stuck in trees and on the top of the church and in the bell tower. And Joseph claimed there was nothing he could do about it. It was completely involuntary. It was against his will. He'd sort of just end up there. And his fellow monks found it so annoying that they would occasionally ignore him. And so he'd sort of be up there in the tree yelling down, going, help, help, ladder, ladder. And they'd sort of walk by. As one said, we'd sort of look like we were lost in prayer, so we couldn't possibly hear him. No, it was a rather annoying habit he had of sort of getting stuck up in trees and tops of churches. And Lambertini, as Benedict XIV now, refused to beatify him and turned him down the first time. Because he said many people have paranormal powers, and simply the ability to do whatever it is that he can do, levitate off the ground, was not a sufficient demonstration that this was a genuine act of sanctification or an act of God. And Lambertini, Benedict XIV, only beatifies him after the second time he's given the opportunity, when the promoter for the cause goes back and demonstrates, initially relies solely on the paranormal material. Benedict is not convinced by this, and which of course, unlike our modern time, Benedict's not convinced by this, and comes back and proves that he was a model of heroic virtue, which ought indeed to be the reason why anybody is beatified or canonized, that he lived a life of saintliness and prayer and help to other people. And on those grounds, Benedict XIV says, yes, indeed, he will beatify him. Now, unfortunately, we have lost Benedict's interest in science and his healthy skepticism about what constitutes divine activity. Parapsychology, which Benedict XIV knew about, and indeed some of the observations that he made about it, have generally been used and still seem to be valid today, particularly about when people are likely to have visionary experiences, when telepathy and precognition are likely to occur. Benedict had theories about liminal times, sleeping, dream time, etc., have been proved by subsequent parapsychologists in the modern times. So in that way, I stand before you as a representative of the original parapsychologists, the Catholic Church, who indeed did it first, and I would argue need to get back to doing that again. My interest focused on weeping and moving and bleeding statues, in particular because they're so popular, and also because in understanding them, we can come to understand, I think, a whole host of other paranormal phenomena that happen in a religious context, by which I mean namely visions. Namely visions. There are two modern prevailing views of weeping, moving, and bleeding statues. The first is that it's nature. And by nature is invariably meant natural causes in the sense of grease being put over a statue that is cold. So when it heats up, the grease weeps. There are some kinds of chemicals, the exact chloral something or other, I'm sorry, I can't remember what it is, if anybody knows, that will actually make a statue appear to weep. Also, the natural explanation includes fraud, which is sticking a wire within the statue, a little tube through the back of the statue, and water then pours out through the eyes. But that's the only understanding of nature. Where nature doesn't seem to be the cause in those two contexts of either we can see the grease or fraud through the tube, the other explanation is always given as God. And what is meant by God is direct divine interventions. And I'm not comfortable with either one of those explanations. I think we can do better. I think it impacts on how we understand God. And I think parapsychology presents us with a third alternative, or rather another view of what a natural alternative would be. That is a natural parapsychological alternative to explain these phenomena. Now, I want to be clear about this. It is not the job of a religionist to prove whether or not psi exists. Blissfully, that's your job. That's not my job. The nice thing we get to do as religionists is to say that if psi exists, what light can it throw potentially on phenomena like weeping, moving, bleeding statues, apparitional experiences, faith healing? And I think it can throw a lot of light on those. So one of the things I became interested in trying to understand what happens in the weeping, moving, bleeding statues, heretofore known as weeping statues, you'll just know I'm covering the range, was I read William Rawls' work on poltergeist outbreaks, and this was a revolution. I just thought, yes, and am I the only one who knows this? It turns out possibly, so you let me know what you think on this. I always worry when I'm the only one who knows something. Rawls discusses poltergeist outbreaks, and I know I'm telling you what you already know, but let me just go the highlights there, in terms of recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis. And he claims that recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis is sudden, dramatic, involuntary, let me get it all right, repetitive, and subject-centered. And the conditions that normally produce this, and again I give you the sort of general overview, the conditions that generally produce this is following illness, following moves, or any kind of situation that produces great anxiety or conflict in the focal agent or the subject around whom this centers. It's like, is it change of life for y'all as hot as I am?
Yeah, it's hot.
Oh, yeah, you can't open a door, I'm not the,
New air conditioner.
is this going to sort of do something with the sound?
Right.
Okay. I just wanted to have a sort of temperature check here, because it was sort of me, as it were. Okay. Rome calls these extrasomatic expressions or extrasomatic manifestations of stress. And I think that the key element here is that the focal agent is often unconscious or unaware that he or she is producing this phenomenon. Thank you very much. Is producing this phenomenon. And I offer for you two cases, one that you might have heard of, one perhaps that's more rare. The first is Father James Bruce, who was a 36-year-old parish priest in Lake Ridge, Virginia, who by his own admission was suffering from depression, anxiety, a crisis in faith, and not to mention a crisis in vocation, deeply frustrated and conflicted about his choices in life, when, don't you know, the weekend before Thanksgiving, statues in his parents' home start to weep. Teresa Musco was 33 years old when statues in pictures in her apartment began to bleed in quotes profusely. Part of the problem here is that very infrequently is the blood or the tears tested. And something that tends to be misleading is the articles in which, in various, you may have read these, in various cases, the one in Italy, where they do take the material or the liquid away and test it, they'll say things like, it's unidentified.
We have water coming out.
And what they, there's water.
Yes, we have an emergency apparently to toilet and that
So we
has to overflow.
we things
Okay.
I'm just trying, I had some applause for the cleanup crew. Oh, dear.
I think God is displeased.
Where's our confirmation? Where's our confirmation?
Step up off the floor.
Let me just say that, not everybody can do this.
Excuse me.
What do you say, divine or?
Yes, the sort of, the plumbing kitties, as it were.
Okay.
I'm just trying, I had some applause for the cleanup crew. Many talents. Right, okay, so that was just my small demonstration of the quiz after.
What time did the work on?
Yes, there you are, we're having it tested, so. Okay, we were talking about RSPK in poltergeist outbreaks, and I wanted to give you two religious cases where I think some similarities might exist. The first is Father James Bruce, who again, let me just remind you, is 36 years old. He has been a priest for roughly 7 years in Lake Ridge, Virginia, when he undergoes a crisis in faith, a crisis in vocation, by his own admission. I mean, it's one of the positive things and differences that a religious experience brings to RSPK outbreaks is the manner in which these events are received and perceived, not only by the subject, but by the community as well, in a very positive way, unlike how they are understood in a poltergeist outbreak. So he himself admits he was depressed, he was in conflict, frustrated about his vocation, when the weekend before Thanksgiving, the statues in his mother's home begin to weep. Shortly thereafter, everywhere that James goes, the statues start to weep. And there are a variety of ways that tests that people put him through. He is sort of picked up one day from his home, and nobody tells him where they're going, and they take him to the bishop's residence. He has no idea that he's going to go there beforehand, and the bishop is locked up. It's sort of like an on-the-spot empirical test. The bishop has locked up all his statues and has, maybe 5 words with Father Bruce, just, sort of idle chat, not even about the phenomena, just sort of how you doing, how are things working out for you. Father Bruce gets back in the car, leaves, the bishop opens up his cabinet, and lo and behold, every icon, every statue is weeping. Hence, of course, the theory is that we've ruled out at least fraud from the point of view of Father Bruce being able to, hightail it there beforehand, get all of the bishop's statues and icons and wire them up in advance. And so, of course, then the explanation that everybody instantly goes for, it must be divine intervention for that reason. Another very famous case which presents, I think, a very interesting point of comparison, but also adds a kind of new and more important twist to it from a religious perspective, is the case of Teresa Musca, who is 33 years old, when the statues and paintings in her home begin to bleed. The blood never having been tested, but they begin to bleed. Now, she comes from Caserta, which is a small town north of Naples in Italy, and this happens in 1975. Now, what's important about Teresa Musca in this event is that from the age of 5, she claimed to have had visions of Jesus. From the age of 9, she claimed the stigmata. She'd been known to the church authorities for quite some time because she claimed to have regular revelations and visions from Christ. They're sort of very nice to her, but of course nobody pays all that much attention to her. Not in necessarily because she's, let me use that technical psychological term, wacko, but because it is not unusual. Yeah, I mean, it is not unusual to find people who claim that they are having visions. The church is quite used to this. Teresa Musca is not the only one who's having this phenomena. In a biography of her, and she is being, again, promoted as a candidate for sainthood, in a biography of her called A Short History of a Victim, she claims many of the aspects of her life coalesce, I believe, with those of a focal agent. She suffers a variety of illnesses throughout her life, tells us that she has spent most of her life in and out of hospitals and in constant pain. As a child, her father beat her and periodically threw her out of the house, and there seems, at least in the literature that I have read, to be marked anxiety about living arrangements seem to be a feature of this, of RSPK outbreaks. This is clearly true in Teresa Musca's case. There's a psychosexual component to it. She claims that on a variety of occasions she was untoward sexual advances were made to her by doctors. There's some evidence that there may have been some sexual abuse when she was a child. She herself admits that by the age of 30 she had failed to achieve what Erickson would call, and I think this is true in almost all those cases, any adult independent life for herself. And hence there's an enormous amount of tension and anxiety and frustration in her life, which she, like Father Bruce, admits to. What's important from a religious perspective about Teresa Musca's bleeding phenomena is that, of course, nobody in the community has taken her revelations or visions seriously until the thing starts to bleed. And then, of course, course, what happens is that the community starts to understand the bleeding statues and pictures as direct divine evidence, that these are authentic. And so what starts to happen is that these external phenomena are understood as divine guarantees of their authenticity. So her visions must now be genuine. Why? Because only God could make this happen. So notice, of course, how this becomes more complicated. In Father Bruce's case, it's complicated enough, but he himself, as did Teresa Musca, claims the stigmata visions, but for him they're personal. And like in RSPK outbreaks, the events leading to a release of this tension for him, he then claims that his problems have been solved. God has indeed given him a sign. He knows what to do about his life. And it will not be surprising to you that within weeks, the frequency of the events start to slow down, and within months they're gone. We know less about this with Teresa Musca because she died within the year of these events starting to happen. But, there would be no committee for the promotion of Teresa Musca for a saint if it were not the case that these phenomena occurred. So it becomes much more pressing in terms of looking at these phenomena that they are often used to validate divine visions or claims that God is speaking to me in some authentic way. Now, two other effects which Raw and his colleagues mentioned that I think are very important here, and I think that are actually heightened in the religious case. The first is the observer effect. And Raw and his colleagues claim that observers can actually enhance the effect. The idea being that the focal agent likes the attention, and with this scrutiny will use it to perform, either to please the observers or to enhance or show them the effect itself. This clearly happens in Father Bruce's case, and it's clear in Teresa Musca, so that you may indeed have seen Father Bruce on your local network television, which he was indeed on. They did a little snippet on him, made the cover of U.S. News and World Report, and then arrived at what is clearly the cultural pinnacle of your 15 minutes of fame. He was in People magazine. And as they kept interviewing him and doing features on him, water everywhere. This is, yes, well, there you are. And this is true of Teresa Musca as well. There are a gruesome once it gets around in the neighborhood that her statues are bleeding, people come from everywhere. You can imagine that here's a woman whom, people have always been very nice to and very kind to, but suddenly they're really listening, they're paying attention to what she has to say, that Christ is telling her. They're all coming over to visit, they want to know what's going on, and there's this truly horrific photo of, her wall. It's just covered in red stuff, just coming down. And it clearly, it just, in some ways, as Teresa's mother said, it was just getting out of hand. And so it does, that the observer effect applies there. There's also another factor he mentions, which I think is crucial too, and it's called object focusing. And Roll and his colleagues claim that the focal agent, that of course the inner unhappiness is manifest in an appropriate external object. So he gives the example of the case of a girl whose hostility towards her mother was manifest in the RSPK phenomena, in the fact that a picture, that her mother's favorite picture, kept repeatedly falling from the wall, as part of it. And I think that it is, or I would like to argue, that in cases of people who have deeply held religious views, who understand themselves in this religious context, that it is not surprising that when these phenomena manifest themselves, they manifest themselves in relationship to religious objects. So that in Father Bruce's case, in Teresa Musca's case, in the sense of statues weeping and bleeding and moving. And hence, I would suggest that in both cases, Father Bruce and Teresa Muscow are the source of these phenomena. Now, let me just add one caveat. People say to me, yeah, but you're talking about, God and all of this, and all of this other religious events, and that clearly, one can't look at it in terms of parapsychology. And I think that we need to understand this, that from the point of view of inexplicable event, simply from the point of view of inexplicable event, a weeping, liquid seeping from a piece of wood or a piece of plaster, which is in effect what is happening, without all the other overlay of it is, it's not Mary, it's not the saint, it's a statue, or a picture, that from the point of view of liquid coming through from a block of wood or a piece of plaster, this is no more, and possibly less extraordinary as an inexplicable event than water cascading into a room, not necessarily from a known plumbing source. Water cascading into a room where there is no known plumbing source. I mean, it strikes me as a by far more inexplicable event. Weaving statues, inflate those. Statues are indeed, no less or more extraordinary than kitchen tables overturning themselves. With no obvious person in sight or no form of known manipulation here. So I think from the point of view of inexplicable event, and how we can understand that, there's no reason to exclude religious phenomena from the discussion. Simply by virtue of what is actually occurring here, there seems to be no reason to exclude religious phenomena. We put all that extra gloss over it and say that it's Mary who's doing it, rather than what we have here is a piece of plaster or a piece of wood in this context. The last thing I'd like to talk about, and then just, because it continues this and then just increase the conversation by your input, is place-centered PK, which I think will help us to go a long way to understand perhaps what goes on at pilgrimage sites, which I think can be very useful. Not in any way impinging on whether or not the messages, visions, revelations, etc. to Teresa Muscow or others are in themselves genuine. They may indeed be genuine, but the paranormal events that occur in connection with them do not lend one way or the other toward that genuineness or authenticity. And I think that place-centered PK can help us there, to the extent to which there are a psychic field is created by an original event. And Lourdes may be such an example here. I think in Medjugorje might qualify, certainly Fatima, La Salette, as well, that you have an original event that creates a psychic field which attracts other viewers to it, purely by the nature of its religious claim. Some of those visitors will be sensitives, and the site itself will help them to release, or will indeed even trigger whatever psi capacity they have, which then adds to the psychic field. And I think may go some way to explaining why, for instance, some sites are successful where others aren't. In terms of why some visions, some pilgrimage sites actually work and some don't, to the extent to which a psychic field is either not created in some rather than others, or where the psychic field is weak in some rather than others. And it would also explain why phenomena continue to occur long after the original seer has either left or died, as in the case of Lourdes or Fatima, etc. That a psychic field is created, that religion, given that it does not understand the world in a material way, simply invites psi capacities and the expression of them. Which leads me to my final view, that one of the things that religion, I think, can give to parapsychology is we don't have in religion ownership problems, as Batchelor claimed. That is, if the problem with parapsychology and people welcoming it is that there's a kind of ownership inhibition, people do not wish to be understood as the cause of these events because they so go against what we understand about the known scientific laws of nature. In religion, this is not a problem. Because it's God, first of all, or it's the saint. So there's no ownership inhibition here. Or, for instance, given that religion takes a more transcendent understanding, a more open understanding of nature, people are not uncomfortable in claiming these events, not to mention they have the whole past history of Scripture and the saints and the lives of mystics in which their paranormal events occur to mystics quite frequently. The second thing is witness. I think I've got this backwards. What is it? It's sort of ownership. Have I got them wrong? Yeah, ownership, resistance, and witness inhibition. That people within a religious context are not inhibited about observing these phenomena. That it comes within the context of their larger worldview. And so that religion, I think, presents an opportunity for the study of psi in a non-laboratory context. If to look at spontaneous cases, which indeed are in many cases recurring, and so provides a scope for that. Again, having nothing to do with the genuineness or the religious genuineness of the event, but certainly in terms of what has actually happened here. I think psychology or parapsychology can help religion to the extent to which it widens our understanding of the psychophysical and the psychosocial dynamics of religious experience. And I think this is in keeping with Benedict XIV, with the entire history of the tradition, that we need to very much widen our understanding of what occurs in religious experience and to include interdisciplinary understandings. This clearly falls within the tradition, and it's something we need to retrieve. It's not something we need to invent. It's something we need to get back. So that's all I have to say. So what do you think? And of course my demonstration.
If miraculous phenomena are reduced in some sense simply to parapsychological or paranormal phenomena, where does that put religion, especially in relation to, say, canonization, where miracle, at least one or maybe two miracles are required? What is the interpretation then of this miracle? Is it simply a paranormal phenomenon, or is it God's intervention in the world, or is it somehow both?
Oh no! See, I think what we have to do is go back to a different understanding of miracle, because miracle ought not be understood as a divine intervention, right then and there. So I think that we should never have gone there. Now we should stick with what is true about a miracle is not its external objective order phenomenon. I mean, one of the nice things that parapsychology has finally done for us is shown us that there is actually no religious paranormal event that does not have a secular equivalent to it. So we in religion tend to think that, oh my God, this never happens except in an oh my God context. And hence God is doing it. And one of the things that parapsychology does is simply open that up and say, no, I don't think so. For every claim that we can make from a religious perspective and say, well, only God could do that, in terms of the objective order phenomena, it exists. And let me just asterisk that. With the exception of spinning sun, I have not found a secular call into that, which may only mean I haven't found one. That doesn't mean there isn't one, it just means I haven't found one yet. Where in my research there's always, so that opens it up. Look, what miracles mean, and what they should mean, is not the objective order of reality, but the meaning of reality that's signified by the event. That is, a miracle is the extent to which one's life is transformed, changed. That's the meaning of reality which is signified, symbolized for this event. So for instance, one person's revelatory tornado is another person's weather front. In that way, my favorite miracle is Maria Rubio and the tortilla, the face of Jesus in the tortilla chip. You see, and that always happens. And notice how we say that. My classes do this all the time. They always go, it's cooking, it's the oil, it's the way you toss the tortilla chip, and you want to say, well, wait a minute. The point here is, are we saying that a miracle is because we know the known laws of cooking, or or science, clearly notice how we're so bogged into this understanding of a miracle as an intervention, an interruption, a suspension of the laws of nature. It isn't. Theologically, a miracle is that reality is transformed. And for Maria Rubio, when she tells you about this, she said, look, she said, my life is different now. I am a different human being since God did this for me. And that is a miracle. By the standard of her life, the external order phenomena, we could claim it's the cooking oil, it's the way she tossed it, whatever. And if all we get is the external order phenomena, we've got no miracle. The miracle is her life is transformed. And the church has tried, saints are supposed to be models of heroic virtue. Yeah, that's what they are. It doesn't have to do with, being able to do the Star Wars zapping, that they sort of came down and went, and, it's a very dicey notion. And they've tried long and hard. Yeah, they've actually reduced the 2 miracles to the 1 miracle. They've tried very hard to get away from this interventionist God and show that what we're looking for here are models of heroic virtue. My life is changed, transformed. That would make it a miracle. Yeah.
But what about, does the church go by the old-fashioned standards from the 14th century for us to make someone a saint today?
It goes, sort of back, it's back and forth, and it's hard to tell, and I clearly don't want to be a person who in any way speaks for the church. There have been, from what I can tell, movements, some positive in light of this interventionist. As I said, we've gone from 2 miracles to 1 miracle. Notice that people are very attached to this notion of an interventionist God. That has been part of what is revealed by the practice of faith is that we tend to like our faith in the special effects department. We tend to like the spectacular stuff. Whereas faith is found in the everyday sacraments, is found in the plodding through it, it's found in that great washing the dishes. That's the miracle is I don't throw Harry out the window. That's the great miracle. In that sense. So yes, some strides have been made in terms of looking at, now we may not all agree as to who constitutes a model of heroic virtue. There's certainly within the last 5 years been questions about who's actually been a model of heroic virtue. But if you're talking about what we to understand God in there have been movements forward and movements back in terms of the church's position.
How many forward, how many back? More forward, more back?
It's kind of hard to tell, and I think, if you read, for instance, Kenneth Woodward's book, Making Saints, there's, a lot of other factors that go into it. There's politics, my SciAC abilities just runneth over this evening, so I apologize for that was unintentional. There are a lot of factors that go into decisions as to why anybody gets beatified and canonized. Not all of them necessarily have to do with the miracles. So, that would take us real far afield. And that may indeed impact on their decision.
Well, what do you believe about Joan of Arc? Do you believe she actually heard voices?
Well, yeah, but see, Joan of Arc was not burned at the stake for hearing voices.
For heresy?
No, she was for hearing the wrong ones. She wasn't burned at the stake for hearing voices. Yeah, she was that the voices she heard were the devil, not for hearing voices. Yeah, not for hearing.
That's what they said. They said she heard the devil.
Yes, but nobody had a problem hearing voices. The point was not whether or not she heard voices.
She was burned at the stake by the English because she heard French voices telling her to make a French king, which threatened the English.
Right, so there you go. There you go. But we've all been watching that television movie of the week. Which will tell you there are a lot of socio-political factors that go into these events that don't necessarily have anything to do with the paranormal events surrounding them. Yeah.
There are 2 areas that you didn't mention. There are weeping Madonnas and weeping the liquefying blood of San Gennaro in Naples, which are not focused on any one person.
Yes.
I've always held that this is possible because the energy of the praying masses in the square environment, which creates kind of a camera obscura effect, creates an energy which is then deposited on these figures. But it is not any individual that causes it. It is a purely mechanical process that has nothing to do with faith except the the energy that is created by fervent prayer.
Okay, so there are individuals, it's not any
In a sense, but it's a mass.
No, I haven't focused on that, but no, I wouldn't, I think that's true, for instance, in churches, I think that would be reasonable, so it would seem to me, in any number of events in which icons move and where we can't identify the actual focal agent. I mean, I've picked the exemplary cases for the point of view of making my case, but no, I wouldn't have a problem with that, I agree. It's one of the things where people will say, I don't know how you feel about this, that praying, does prayer help sick people? And you want to say, well, is it the faith, is it the prayer, or is it the absorbed mentation, or the energy that's created by the people who are praying that do that? I don't know.
I think it's the energy that is intervening in the aura of the person about to be healed. But on the other hand, we have, in one of my books, I've shown photographs taken in churches where this occurs. The person who takes the photograph obviously has to be a photography medium, but there are a lot of people who are, and then it shows what I call the spaghetti effect. It shows whitish substances which are probably a form of albumin, ectoplasm in the world of Hollywood, and in some cases this forms into faces, it forms into actual figures, and even into writing.
Really?
Oh yes, indeed.
Oh, wow.
And the person who has taken the picture is just a person, and the camera has not very much to do with it. It could be done with photographic paper as well, exposed in that area, because the energy is there. But the energy does not mean divine intervention. The energy is a natural phenomenon caused by the emotion, like all psychic phenomena. Emotional elements cause psychic phenomena, and nothing else. It's a gift, but it is a gift. But I think the same energy that causes psychic phenomena, including materializations, including the ectoplastic formations, are from the same source as emotions, feelings, and not from the mind. That is at least what I found.
Yeah.
Lisa, along the lines of that question, I just happen to have some photographs. But these are the things that were taken in Zaytun, Egypt, the suburb of Cairo. What was it, about 20 years ago? And they're like this picture of what looks like, you've seen this.
Right, yes, that's the famous one.
Yeah, you might. Now, what's we just elucidate a little bit on what you think caused these pictures. Hundreds of thousands of people saw them. I guess the Pope, the Egyptian, Ethiopian Pope was there. All sorts of people, Muslims saw them. In fact, Muslims were the first ones that saw them. And of course, everybody says you can't take a ghost picture with a camera and so on, but
I've done it.
That's wrong. Oh, I know. Yes.
What do you think, John?
I think it's along the line of the holster that.
Let me tell you something.
It's the energy of that crowd. Yeah.
Easter Sunday, one of the rare occasions I go to church. I went to my church, and I sat in a pew where there was only my ex-mother-in-law next to me, and the entire bench was empty. The other end there were people. And I asked permission to take pictures with my, the mechanical cameras you have these days. And he said, yes, but take it before the Mass starts. Now, I took one picture, and when it came back, there is a huge white energy field right next to me that wasn't there, visible to the naked eye. Now, to me, this is old hat. But it's the first time I was able to do this in a contemporary church. Now, this is energy that might have eventually formed into a body or into some writing or whatever the spirit entity that causes it would want to do with it. This is raw material. And if you have that gift, and many have it, you can take pictures. I took pictures in Winchester Cathedral, for instance, on a rainy day. The humidity of the air has a lot to do with it. And lo and behold, there in the pews are a bunch of monks walking that have been walking there since 400 years. And are they imprints from the past that have no life of their own, or are they spirits? That's a tough one. You can only distinguish if you observe the phenomena repeatedly, and if you get different versions of it, then they're spirits. If you get the same imprint, it's nobody there except an imprint from the past. But that's possible, and it shows we're dealing with energy here. Now, it's not any less spiritual. I mean, everything is from God, even the fact that...
I'm not arguing. just arguing it's not this one particular.
Yeah, but when there becomes a focal of childish, I hate to say this, but childish belief that that the Madonna or Jesus or other have nothing better to do than to come down and calm the fears of somebody. I worry about it.
Well, that's a different aspect altogether. Yes.
I'm curious about the artifacts, like the blood. You know, we've all seen these pictures. There's blood, all of. How is that approached after the fact? I mean, often you'll hear, you know, it wasn't analyzed. We don't know. I mean, do they just wipe this up as if it were, you know, like the water here? Do they take a wet vac? Do they clean it up? Or like the tortilla, you know, what happens?
Oh, I can tell you about the tortilla. The tortilla is actually in a frame. Surround the edges of the frame, will have cotton taped to them, so because of course otherwise the tortilla, when it hits, you don't want. It's not so easy what to do with a tortilla to preserve it. You don't want to. If you tack it to something, it's worrying, and you don't want to put glue on. And I don't mean I don't mean to be sort of amusing. I don't mean to be disrespectful about it. But you sort of think of there are the problems. So no, but it's in a frame with surrounded by cotton so that it sort of stays stable. In the case of Father Bruce, they used to collect them I would say Tupperware, but nothing in particular, sort of in plastic vats. And I'm not actually kind of sure. I know they didn't. I know the bishop. They didn't sell them because I know there was this. People were horrified by this, and the bishop wouldn't allow it. But I'm not quite sure what happened to it. To my knowledge, the blood, and always in quotes, some of it actually, in some cases, turns out to be actually blood, but it's human blood. And then one wonders what people expect it to be. I mean, which is what I can never kind of get anybody. Well, what did you think it was going to be? I think a little too much sci-fi going on here in terms of what was it going to be. So in that sense, it's either human blood, or they'll say things like it's unidentified. Sometimes what they mean by that is it's human, but they don't know whose. So they call it unidentified. But of course, to us, the public, it gives the impression that it might well be, I don't know,
So this is considered a religious artifact. Like normal.
Yes.
Not just wipe it up.
But to my knowledge, it's not saved either. I can't speak for the Teresa Muscat case because I don't know. But I mean, it's not. It was saved. Part of the problem is that if you save enough of it, then we're going to want to test it. And there's this real resistance to testing it. So it's not in fact like the host and the wine and communion, where you save it and you've got to use it. It's not treated as an artifact in that way. It does seem to be collected, but it doesn't seem to be saved in the way that you're indicating. For it seems to me a certain amount of practical reasons in that sense.
A few months ago in a journal of forensic medicine, it was an article about analyzing a blood from the same figure in Italy. And the authors found that it was a blood of very rare monkey.
Yes. Yeah, so, I mean, there's that famous one in Syracuse in Italy, that's been a long-term one that they claim, it's hard to know what the answer there is. There's one they found human blood.
Yes, but the author cannot find that the monkey is so rare that it was difficult to find one monkey in Italy. So it was very, very rare.
So the mystery continues. Even if you wanted to claim it was in some way put there, it's sort of hard to know how it got there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was curious because you brought up the miracle of the spinning sun at Fatima. And from the little I've read about it, it seems that some of the crowd saw this phenomenon where it appeared that the sun came down and spun around and there were rainbow lights everywhere, but others in the crowd did not see it, which implies that it wasn't an actual physical occurrence, it was a kind of subjective.
Most of what I've read has had, the conclusion is that nothing happened to the sun. That, the sun was, meteorologically and in all the ways that one can test that, the sun was there doing whatever the sun does and didn't move at all off its rotation and its axis. The photograph, the photograph that's usually given out what's kind of interesting about Fatima is that despite the fact that there were over 1,000 journalists there that day and several hundred photographers, nobody got a picture. It's kind of interesting. The main picture, I won't say the only, but the main picture that's put forward of this. Now, I'm not saying that the collective event didn't happen here, but some interesting things arise here. The only picture the main picture, that's put forward for Fatima actually is of an eclipse that occurred a year before. So the picture that's generally sort of shown as the Fatima, it's a kind of gray, sort of dark-looking Fatima picture. And you sort of wonder if the sun's sort of spinning around. Wow, does it look? You say, oh, well, the photography wasn't as good back then. Yeah, but it isn't. It's actually it's a photo of an eclipse taken the year before because they didn't get a photo of it. I don't know that once again, I'm not looking at the authenticity. Part of this is always to constantly reissue this disclaimer that says that whatever is the genuineness or authenticity of the revelation at Fatima does not, it seemed to me, and nor does it mean to, rely on the external order phenomena regardless of what that is. But it's kind of interesting about that spinning sun that there were hundreds of photographers there and nobody got a picture of it, and that the picture used is actually not of that. I'm sorry, you had your hand up. I just wanted to get other people who hadn't spoken yet, so I apologize.
The supernatural has been the claimed domain of religion for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Father Herbert Thurston, for instance, was denied...
One of the great pioneers.
But he was denied permission to attend seances. Now, given your more open approach, are you suggesting, or is the Catholic Church now taking a more secular position regarding these phenomena? They certainly have prohibited your own followers from studying some of these phenomena directly. Herbert Thurston would be one. You seem to be more open, and you seem to be advocating a more secular approach.
I don't want to presume just that's that word.
I don't know whether it was Prospero Lambertini or even way back earlier, maybe it's St. Augustine, but I remember reading something about how one of these early figures of the church was sorting the phenomena into either what we would call parapsychological phenomena or miracles, and drawing a very distinction, giving examples of each, and the miracles being based on the divine intervention and so on, the parapsychological being unusual phenomena. Okay, so way back then they were, struggling with this issue of what are these things.
Yeah, and I think what you have here, it depends on who you're reading. That is, in terms of what's on. So that, Karl Rahner, one of the architects of Vatican II, a main Catholic theologian, argues in a book called Visions and Prophecies. In the very beginning, he says, look, we have got to go to parapsychological studies in order to understand this. And the bibliography, for when it was written, refers to Rhine and Thurston, etc., and says, look, we've got to look into these things and understand them in their context. And Rahner, of course, says, look, what makes something genuinely of God? It's the meaning of reality that this event symbolizes, not the external order phenomena in that sense. And it's just this division between the secular and the religious that becomes problematic in trying this extrinsicist view of grace that we've divided the world up into nature and grace, nature and the supernatural, so that what you end up with is a God out there, who then intervenes in here. And of course that's very problematic, because what you are then arguing is that God is somehow excluded from God's own world. And so what happens is, Warner argues, is that, well, not God has to move over so that God can come in. Yeah, and this becomes very problematic. So Warner wants to argue that we need to understand nature as in grace. And as in grace, it's not the world that changes, but my experience and understanding of it. Yeah, so that my vision is transformed. Yeah, so I see things differently than I saw them before, but rather than having this kind of extrinsic, two-tiered view of nature and grace.
I'm beginning to get a sense, though, that there is curiosity from religious people, Catholics and others, about mysticism. This is the context within which they teach it, study it, and talk about it, and the cities and the powers happen within, across cultures worldwide, across religions worldwide, within that framework. That's acceptable. But sometimes even at Fordham has to be kept kind of low-key. I know two people who teach it there, but they don't list it as what they're teaching.
Now, what exactly do they teach?
They're teaching mysticism. They're teaching about it, but they don't put it in the catalog that way. That's what they're doing, and they know that's what they're doing, but they don't put it that way because the powers that be at Fordham are quite ready for that. But the other piece, well, I haven't read it, but I just know that's the case because they take our training too. And I see what we do is to teach a marriage of science and mysticism. I teach people how to do healing within Larry LeChunt's theoretical framework. And I see what's happening now. I've been doing that for 30 years, and I see what's happening now very much faster and very much more obviously is the barrier between science and religion is breaking down. People are talking to one another in new ways. They're really making fresh land. They're being honest. They're not being rigid about it as much anymore. It's taking
that's great, yeah.
But I think as that happens, the physicists who seem to be the ones who are digging around trying to figure out who we are, what's our consciousness, are the ones from which perhaps a lot of this is coming. One of the articles that we put in our newsletter recently was from Peter Russell, who's a British physicist and other things. He's many things. And the title of it, which was also given as a talk at the ISM conference and the Science and Consciousness conference, the most recent one, was Science and Consciousness and, dare I say it, God. This is his work, and he's trying to logically present explanations of what the movement is in our understanding of the paradigm shift, which we haven't finalized yet, but we're in it. We're in a scientific revolution that's as massive as the Copernican revolution. It hasn't come to fruition yet. And all this stuff is going to be clarified, I would think, when that kind of information ripens. And there's communication between groups that haven't communicated a good deal.
Yeah, I think it comes in waves, you know. I mean, it's happened before, then we had the great divorce, and now we may have the great conversation again.
It's a pretty amazing shift in our understanding of who we are.
Yes, but there's still an enormous amount of people understand mysticism solely in terms of the external order phenomena. And hence again, that emphasis on God in terms of the special effects, rather than this understanding of God as present in reality at all times. Yes, and at all times transforming us, rather than somewhere out there, dipping down.
But what does that mean? We don't really know what that means. We were on the moon before we started understanding what goes on in this.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, I agree. I mean, the majority of my students are deeply Freudian, though they would be loath to admit it when we do this in religion and psychology. And you know, they know who Einstein is, but I mean, who we are in the Newtonian universe, at least from what passes through my classroom in that way. But they have yet to catch up with Einstein, let alone modern quantum physics.
And the work that people like Hans Herd is doing.
Absolutely, psychoneuroimmunology.
Yeah, exactly, the biochemistry of emotion.
Oh yes, that there are neuropeptides, that emotions have chemical correlates. I mean, in terms of faith healing, I think this is simply going to revolutionize how we understand what goes on at Lourdes. That yes, indeed, you know, one is that illnesses, you don't have to have one of those psychological illnesses in order to get cured at Lourdes, you know, notwithstanding the limbs not being regenerated, but that you can actually have a real body illness And then I think bio-PK and psychoneuroimmunology will go a long way, as well as the energy created by the sheer numbers of people putting out that prayer may well help to explain, without a doubt, what goes on. Absolutely.
Lots of finite detail.
Absolutely. We want to revolutionize the whole Mondam's doing great work on signs and wonders, in which, although he says, it's the sign, nevertheless devotes endless pages to proving real cases. Will simply have to be redone. They're all real cases in some way.
What do you do about the people who historically have written about the Marian apparitions, who say that whenever one has happened, it was a precursor to some kind of disastrous occurrence that followed within the number of years following? Mythological occurrence.
I think they're too broad and too general to make any kind of concrete claims about that. When Lucia said, and of course if we remember this at that, she said it post facto, that is, she said it in 1942, that Mary had told her in 1918, that there was going to be what turned out to be the Second World War, so a major world conflagration. So I don't have a problem with, when she says what. I mean, from my position, she would be telling the absolute truth. I don't mean lying, but misremembering. That Mary indeed did tell her this in 1918. Nevertheless, it seems to me that it's a very broad statement. There will be another conflagration. All of Europe will participate. And I think that anybody sensitive in the middle of World War I could have said World War II was on its way. I mean, if they were just more...
But not even the content, simply the appearance.
What do you make? I don't get all that impressed by that. I mean, at any given time, conflict is erupting somewhere. What the point?
The point is that you assume that God is here, wherever, and this all comes directly from God. I am totally convinced from my work that there comes constant intervention from the other side. The other side is people like you and I have passed on to the next dimension. They're not angels, they're not devils, they are people who live in a different dimension. Now this is God's will too. I am totally convinced that the young lady in Portugal and the young lady in France who saw a woman, they all, and in Yugoslavia, they all see this woman that they assume to be the Virgin. Why not just a spirit, a woman, who is able, because from their position on the other side, to predict things like psychic people often do. The Virgin.
I don't know that you have to go that far. That is, I don't know that you have to necessarily look to postmortem apparitions in that sense. I think, if you wanted to make that claim, and what I intuit is that's not what you're sort of saying, is there's some sort of, I think you could do this by telepathy amongst the living.
Yeah, but they see
without having to go anywhere outside of this known realm.
The girl did see a woman in France.
Well, see, my research doesn't actually bear that out in quite that way.
The way she describes it, I think she saw.
You see, well, that's different. That's different. That brings us to that. That's different. The 8 great Marian visions, starting with La Salette and Lourdes and Banda and Pomain and Beaurain, in every single one, there was no figure cited in the initial vision.
What about? Do you think Lourdes?
No. You got to read the documents really carefully. In every single one, what they saw was a light. Or in the initial vision, with the exception of La Salette and Pomain was a skylighting, and La Salette was a one-off event. There's only one vision.
But they saw something spiritual.
Well,
what did you see anyway?
They saw this kind of light, and maybe the outline of the figure. This is what I've discovered here. They go back home, and this is true in every single case. One of the things that strikes me as so impressive is that there's not one that veers from this pattern. They go back home, and they say, God, we saw something strange. They're always outside. It's always at some, normally it's noonish, the light, there's always a strange light, the light, the dentures tonight. The light is always at a peak moment or at a declining moment. They see something, they go, and I mean literally they see something. They go back home and they say, we saw either this light or we saw this figure. In every single case, it's one of those few times where you can say always, it's the community that says, oh, you must have seen Mary. Oh, it is the community that then sends them back for the next vision. And so all subsequent events are I'm not saying things don't happen there, but no, it is not the case that they always see it's not the case that they always see a figure. And I talked to Joni about this. The great revelation of La Salette is, do you know La Salette? La Salette is 1846. La Salette, Melanie and Peter, Melanie and Pierre. Melanie and Pierre, they're out sort of, they're 6, they're 7, they're under the age of 10, I think. And they're out there herding their sheep. It's the middle of the day. And from over in a distance, they see, and La Salette needs more work, because there's actually, at La Salette, they see this figure of a woman coming towards them. And they're shocked, because, they're in the middle of nowhere, where did this woman come from? This figure of a woman comes toward them. Now, in their initial story, before it gets overlaid, in their initial story, they talk that this woman tells them that she is being beaten by her son. And I think what we've got here is this extraordinary crisis apparition. This woman, she says she's being beaten by her son. She can't hold him off anymore from his wicked things. And she was very, very sad. They say she was very upset. She cried, and then she left.
It's a spirit apparition then.
Well, I mean, it's sort of, but I mean, the point is that they go back home and all sorts of other things occur as a result of this. I think La Salette's sort of interesting in the way it's very, the story evolves and develops and gets dressed up and taken out and all sorts of things. But I mean, in every case where there's a serial apparition, it's not altogether clear that they even see a figure until somebody says it must have been Mary. And the figure only identifies itself after the community has done so. In no case, where there's a serial apparition of Mary, has the figure ever said, I'm Mary of the whatever.
Wait.
Until after the community has first identified her.
I am the Immaculate Conception.
And got it wrong.
Of course.
And got it wrong. And you just, and that's worrisome. Nobody can be the Immaculate Conception.
Of course not.
And got it wrong. So I mean, right, but it's not like, it's arguable as to whether or not, Mary sort of shows up and doesn't know who she is from the other side.
Children, too.
And yes, I mean, there are a lot of ways to explain that. There are a lot of ways to explain that, but I mean, you get this in every single case. This is clear. In every single case.
It sounds as if the phenomena is being shaped by group suggestion.
I don't think the whole thing is shaped by group suggestion. I wouldn't say that at all. I think there are initial events, there are initial experiences. In some cases, there's some claim that some of them are a comcast. Banya, Borang, the 8 kids, oh God, I think it's Banya, I apologize, I know that it's either one or the other, that there's a sense in which, in every single case of the great 8 Marian apparitions, all of the seers knew about the previous pattern of Marian visions. Not one of them was ignorant of Marian visions prior to that. So there's a sense in which they are shaped both before and after. But I think that's too much to claim. I think there is an initial event. There's something that happens in every single case. With, of course, the sort of one skeptical occasion that, maybe, since it happened to the people down the road, we want one too. And there's a huge, I mean, have you noticed this? Writers talk about this sort of fashion in visions. I mean, if the church, this is true of weeping icons, if the Greek Orthodox one down the block then, in the next borough, they gotta have one. And, the minute you see, there's that great in Clearwater, Florida, there was a picture of the Virgin. And we really must be careful. I read something that Jody sent me the other day of Jesus appearing in a convenience store in the glass, in the refrigerator, and 3 people were absolutely certain it was Jesus because, and I quote, it looked like him. And we really got to be careful about that. We really, really have to be careful about that. And you know what I mean? We do this all the time. And it's true about Mary as well. It looked like her. From what? The video, the photograph, the painting, in what sense? But I think in many cases there's an initial event that needs to be explored, and it gets overlaid with all that social and political.
Is this a pattern that cuts across other cultures?
Yes, yes, I have to say this is true. When I first started working on this, your cousins, who's the general editor of the World Spirituality Series, was one of the readers that I dissertated. So he said, "Oh, yawn. He said, if you went to do this in the East, he said, if you propose this in India, it'd be a whole entirely different proposal." They're like, "Oh, really?" People see people all the time, why get worked up over it? Nobody's, what could you possibly claim about it? So that, yes, it occurs. It's true, for instance, that you find in certain Orthodox Jewish communities, people believe that they are miraculously healed by eating, sort of food and the table of their great religious leader. If you look at what's happening to Rabbi Schneerson in the Lubavitcher community, again, as with the Christian visions, prescinding from the question of authenticity and whatever. But nevertheless, he's said to intercede on people's behalf and perform miracles. Islamic tariqas are able to do this as well. There's a whole list of Buddhist nuns who do healing, etc. So yes, it crosses the line. Christianity is just the one I know best, but you'll find it everywhere. It's not a necessarily Christian phenomenon. Yeah.
We live 5,000 years after Jesus and everything.
So, you have to worry about the millennium?
Yeah, whatever. But anyway, the point is that, like you say, how do we really know what they look like? So if we don't know what they look like, how can the churches pick up the pictures for the Bibles and all that?
But see, I don't think that's necessarily so much of a problem. That is, I think that if you look at these events as being if you look at them as telepathic information is being transmitted here, and images and sound are the main forms in our culture that we receive information, then the unconscious is going to throw up an image, as it does in dreams. It's going to throw up an image in order to communicate this unconscious material, this telepathic material to us. And so the fact that, Mary shows up, looking, in Yugoslavia she looks, Slavic, in Spain she looks Mediterranean and Spanish, I don't think that's really a problem. I also don't think it's a problem that she looks like, Bernadette's Aunt Beatrice. Do you know, that's not really, what else? How else would the information get across unless it came in some form I could recognize? That is, if Mary showed up not looking like the Mary I know from church or my culture, I wouldn't know it was her. And of course, the point is that the whole point is to give me information I don't otherwise have. And image and sound are the main ways it's transmitted. So I don't necessarily think that the fact that, Mary always looks different or wears the same clothing, necessarily, and psychologists make a lot about this, debunkers make a lot about this. I don't know that that's necessarily a point that can't be overcome once you accept that there's some sort of psi activity going on here. I don't think that that's hard to overcome.
The images they take for the statues, it had to come from something.
Oh, I don't know how churches come up with who poses for Mary. That I don't know. That's way, I have no idea who does that.
There are pictures of Jesus relatively early on visiting coins, going back maybe 600-700 after the event, which you don't have of Mary. So there's some possibility, not to mention the Shroud of Turin. Well, I think it's...
You should have been at my doctoral defense, in which we spent a lot of time talking about the Shroud. It was one of the main topics of the hot topics was a shroud of
No, I think it is.
Turin.
But, you know.
Yeah, one more, and then
One more. Getting back to the Lady of Fatima, the three children who were blessed to see her, isn't it kind of strange that they died at such young ages?
well, no, there was an influenza epidemic. Only two of them are dead. Only two of them are dead. Lucia's still alive. She's in a Carmelite convent. She's still alive. She's 80, late 80s now. No, the two of them died, but there was an influenza. And did you see in the paper that they've come very close to, they've been beatified. And last week, I think. How off the facts they
What they died from? I watch that movie all the time and I can never figure
Yeah, they're rural.
They never say.
Yeah, no, they're a rural agricultural family. They all came from that.
Yeah, speaking of the topic of death, of visionaries, I've read in Catholic literature that the body of Bernadette Soubirous, who had the visions at Lourdes, has not decomposed. It is preserved under glass in the convent or something, and I wonder if you know anything about that, whether she had been embalmed or anything like that.
I don't know. John, do you know what happened? I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know what happened
Because, she's now canonized as a saint.
Oh, has been?
Yeah, and she's supposedly claimed by the Catholic Church as, incorruptible, that the incorruptible flesh as evidence of her sanctity. But I don't know any
I believe she has
details.
this book, The Incorruptibles. Joan, that had a section on her, but I think she's not embalmed, I don't think.
Well,
I have to check it.
I don't know. I mean, to me, I think immediately she must have been embalmed. But even so, that's not proof for sanctity.
Oh, no.
140 years here.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, no, and it's certainly not proof of anything, really. It's sort of an unusual anomaly.
But apparently she's in a glass coffin, so anybody can go.
Go and see, yeah, let in you.
She's got a bit of Mother Cabrini.
And then there could be a whole new pilgrimage, sightings of those who are dead. Thank you very much.
Just to do such a wonderful presentation under such trying circumstances. And I do apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I changed back. It wasn't on Facebook. It wasn't on Facebook.
That's why they never let me come there.
Yes, it'll be a long time again, dear, yeah, for sure. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've done very well.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Yes.
That's wonderful.
Good acting. I want to show you this picture I told you about. It's not in my book because I just did it. But this one I did. Look at this.
Okay.
My book is full of it, but this one I did. Innocent work. Sometimes you see other things that you can have aside.
Hi there, I'm Lisa Schwebel. I'm president of Parapsychology Foundation, so welcome to our YouTube channel. We have lots to look at, so please check out our videos. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.